Hello there and welcome to our nightly news program coming to you live on All 24 News. Here from Algiers. Coming up next are today's top stories. Dozens of Zionist settlers led by the extremist Itamar Ben-Gvir storm Al-Aqsa Mosque under tight security by occupation police. Also coming up, Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces finally agree on a 7-day truce brokered by Saudi Arabia and the USA. Also ahead, many political actors from various countries joined the solidarity movement with the Sahrawi cause in the International Conference of Solidarity with Sahrawi People. And Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulates Wagner forces and Russian army for the liberation of the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, while Kiev disclaims that Bakhmut is captured. Hello again and welcome to the program. First off in our topical news, dozens of Zionist settlers led by the extremist Itamar Ben-Gvir stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque on Sunday under tight security from the occupation police, a step Palestinians' Arab countries consider a dangerous and provocative act. Islam Sid reports.
Just few days after the Zionist flag march, here is another provocative step taken by the Zionist occupier. Protected by the Zionist security, the extremist so-called National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir stormed Al-Aqsa compound along with other settlers. The occupation police closed all gates of the mosque and prevented Palestinian worshippers from going in to allow the minister and the horde of settlers to perform Talmudic rituals that are considered a desecration against the Holy Mosque.
These continuous incursions are the culmination of the religious war waged by the occupying state against everything that is Islamic in the city of Al-Quds, and a flagrant violation of international law and the decisions of the international community. Our Palestinian people will continue to defend their sanctities, whatever the price and whatever the sacrifices.
This incursion of the Holy Islamic site is the second of its kind by the hawkish Ben-Gvir since he took office as a minister. The latter has faced strong condemnation by Palestinians and the Arab countries, who see it a provocative act against Muslims. In fact, since 2003, Al-Aqsa Mosque has been exposed to Zionist occupation and settlers' incursions almost every day, making Palestinian Muslim worshippers uncomfortable and subjected to extreme violence by the Zionist guards and settlers. Not only that, according to reports, Netanyahu's government has approved new settlement plans to build around 1,700 settlement units in occupied Al-Quds. This vicious attempt aims at displacing more Palestinians from the holy city amid international calls for urgently ending the Zionist government settlement measures that defy all international regulations and UN resolutions.
As a response to Ben-Gvir and settlers' incursion to Al-Aqsa Mosque, the spokesman of the Palestinian presidency, Nabil Abu Rudaini, described the act a blatant attack on the holy site that will have serious consequences. He pointed out that Ben-Gvir's incursion into the holy site necessitates immediate action from the international community.
Attempts by Itamar Ben-Gvir and his likes of extremists to change the status quo in Al-Aqsa Mosque are condemned and rejected and will fail. Our Palestinian people will be on the lookout for them. Extremist Ben-Gvir's incursion at an early hour, like thieves, into Al-Aqsa Mosque courtyards will not change the reality and will not impose Israeli sovereignty over it. Harming Al-Aqsa Mosque is playing with fire and will push the region into a religious war with unimaginable consequences that will affect everyone.
In a different development, after more than a month of fierce fighting and several other ceasefires agreements failed, the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces have finally agreed on a 7-day truce brokered by Saudi Arabia and the USA. The agreement was signed after several international calls for truce for humanitarian purposes. Osama Ayadi has more.
Sudan's warring factions signed an agreement on Saturday for a 7-day ceasefire in Jeddah, while armed conflicts that have killed at least 850 people continue in the country. Representatives of the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces signed the agreement for humanitarian purpose, and the agreement will enter into force at 9:45 p.m. Khartoum time on Monday.
Unlike previous ceasefires, the agreement reached in Jeddah was signed by the parties and will be supported by US Saudi, an international supported ceasefire monitoring mechanism.
The conflicting parties also agreed to set up a special committee to monitor the implementation of the agreement. The agreement appealed for withdrawing forces from hospitals and resuming service of public facilities. The two parties also agreed to facilitate the safe passage of humanitarian assistance and commodities, allowing goods to flow unimpeded from ports of entry to populations in need.
Both parties have conveyed to the Saudi and US facilitators their commitment not to seek the military advantage during the 48-hour notification period after signing the agreement and prior to the start of the ceasefire.
Sudan's warring factions signed several agreements before to end the conflict since it broke out in mid-April, but none has been fully implemented, and fighting has continued in Sudan's capital Khartoum and its outskirts.
It is well known that the parties have previously announced ceasefires that have not been observed.
Earlier, airstrikes hit Omdurman, a city close to Khartoum, another in Khartoum Friday evening and Saturday morning, and killed at least 18 civilians. Some strikes took place near the state broadcast of Omdurman, as eyewitnesses in Khartoum also reported that sporadic gunshots could be heard in the city. The armed conflict displaced more than 1.1 million Sudanese people, and the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimated that about 850,000 people will enter Ethiopia from Sudan, with humanitarian needs forecast to rise steeply in such scenario.
The Malian government, through its Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abdallah Diop, reaffirmed Mali's commitment to implementing the peace and reconciliation agreement emanating from Algiers process. During a meeting with several officials, Diop explained that all procedures related to the political path are being envisaged and implemented within the framework of consensual and comprehensive approach.
Nous voudrions à cet égard aussi saluer le rôle clé.
On this occasion, I would like to thank Algeria for its important leadership role in international mediation. Despite the difficulties, the government of Mali remains determined to implement the peace and reconciliation agreement resulting from the Algiers process and achieve peace and stability in the region.
In a different development, on Sunday, the Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Brahim Bughali, had a working session with the Speaker of the Zambian Parliament, Nelly Botiti Kashumba Muti, who is on an official visit to Algeria. In a statement, the Speaker of the Zambian Parliament explained that her visit to Algeria was aimed at discussing ways to strengthen parliamentary relations, but also to proceed with the installation of the friendship group between the parliaments of the two countries. Still in Africa, in support of Sahrawi people's struggle for liberation, many political actors from various countries joined the solidarity movement with the Sahrawi cause, attending the International Conference of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people in the Sahrawi refugee camps. Zahra Farjani has the story.
The Sahrawi cause is gaining unprecedented international momentum as the support for different international bodies is increasing. On Saturday evening, and in many refugee camps, International Conference of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people kicked off with a wide foreign presence who stand with the Sahrawi Arab Republic and its people who've been fighting for their legitimate right to independence and self-determination for over half a century.
I assure you that the Algerian people will remain steadfast in their position, supporting your legitimate struggle for freedom and self-determination. Be absolutely certain that victory is near, and what is lost due to struggles and sacrifices of Sahrawi people will inevitably be crowned with a clear victory.
In all languages and from different parts of the world, the participants in the International Conference of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people are pleading for the liberation of the last colony in Africa, while the leaders of the Polisario Front are still fighting the Moroccan occupation and expand foreign support for their just cause.
We should start first with the national liberation movements and some experiences. especially in Africa, including Sahrawis, and the Algerian experiences as one of the most unique experiences in confronting colonialism. Also African people's experiences, including those present here from Zimbabwe, Kenya, and South Africa. We salute the official installation of the Joint Parliamentary Committee to support the right of the Sahrawi people in liberation and independence.
Associations, organizations, and activists who believe in the cause of the Sahrawis support their diplomatic battles and call for intensifying efforts to defend the Sahrawi cause worldwide.
The head of the Mauritanian Independent Electoral Commission, Dahwel Abdel Jalil, announced on Sunday the preliminary results of the municipal, regional, and legislative elections. In press statements, the spokesman revealed the turnout in the polls had reached 71%, indicating that the local and regional councils were all decided in the first round, with the exception of one municipality. While the parliamentary decision is expected in 22 constituencies, including 4 abroad, during the second half of the elections.
نسبة المشاركة 71.8%.
The participation rate is 71.8%, and in the final result during the first half, the following was decided. As for representatives, 40 constituencies were decided, and 22 constituencies went to the second round, including 4 abroad. As for the one-round regional and municipal elections, they were decided in all concerned departments, except for one municipality, in which it was postponed to the second round.
The head of the Mauritanian Independent Elections Commission, Dahwel Abdel Jalil, also said that he shares with all parties the sincere will and strong ambition to organize the elections.
I assure you that the Electoral Commission shares with all parties the sincere will and strong ambition to organize elections without any impurities, despite constraints and obstacles.
16 civilians were killed by militants of the Allied Democratic Forces movement in the village of Kathulu in the Beni district of North Kivu province in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. The gunmen disguised themselves as soldiers who came to secure citizens who were participating in mourning in the village. Local authorities in the region pointed out that the enemy has changed its operational approach in killing citizens, calling on security forces to make an urgent change to their strategy to protect civilians. To Russia-Ukraine file now. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Sunday congratulated the Wagner forces and the Russian army for what he called the liberation of the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, while Kiev disclaimed the report and said that Bakhmut is not captured yet. Here's Sofian Kenturi with more.
Russia and Ukraine offered contrasting versions of the situation in Bakhmut on Sunday, while Kiev maintained that it still retained control over a small portion of the besieged city. Moscow hailed the Wagner private army and Russian troops for successfully liberating Bakhmut.
The head of state congratulated Wagner's assault group, as well as members of the units of the Russian armed forces, who provided them with the necessary support and cover on their flanks, on the completion of the operation to liberate Artemovsk.
For his part, the founder of the Wagner group stated that Bakhmut was under complete control of the Wagner fighters, with no remaining Ukrainian soldiers present.
Today at noon, at 12 o'clock, Bakhmut has been fully captured. The last area, so-called multi-story apartment building Samolya.
The claim by Prigozhin comes amidst a report of intense fighting and significant casualties suffered by both sides. While according to Ukrainian military spokesperson, Ukrainian forces have partly encircled Bakhmut along the flanks and still control a part of the city. Denying Russian claims, Bakhmut had fallen completely and was theirs.
The statements of Prigozhin are not true. As usual, our units there control a couple of buildings and have fortified constructions in the southwestern part of Bakhmut.
Casting doubt on these claims as well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said during his visit to Japan that Russian forces are not occupying Bakhmut.
Today they perform a critical task. Today they are in Bakhmut. Where exactly? I cannot say. But this suggests that Bakhmut is not captured by the Russian Federation today. There can be 2 or 3 interpretations of this.
The fall of Bakhmut holds significant symbolic importance, representing Moscow's first major victory in the conflict. that has spanned over 10 months. With its strategic location in eastern Ukraine, the city has been a focal point of contention for both Russia and Ukraine.
At a news conference after the group of 7 nations wrapped up their summit in Hiroshima, Biden said they had agreed on a united approach to China that called for diversifying supply chains to reduce dependence on one country, and hinted that the bloc does not seek a rupture with China, but seeks to neutralize risks, expecting an improvement in relations soon.
We should have an open hotline. At the Bali conference, that's what the President Xi and I agreed we were going to do and meet on. And then this silly balloon that was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spine equipment was flying over the United States, and it got shot down, and everything changed in terms of talking to one another. I think you're going to see that begin to thaw very shortly.
Turkish citizens based abroad began voting on Saturday on Turkey's presidential runoff election between the incumbent Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his main challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who aims to bring an end to the president's 2-decade rule. In many countries around the world, long queues of Turkish citizens willing to cast their votes formed already in the morning when the polling station opened.
If I see what Erdogan has done in 20 years in Turkey, before him, when our presidents come to visit Europe or the US, they stood there, as if waiting for orders. Now it's eye to eye, on the same level with other leaders. That's an advantage. It tells you how far we have come. Is that not enough?
Still with elections, but this time in Greece, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, whose Conservative Party has won a landslide election but without enough parliamentary seats to form a government, has indicated he will seek a second election to consolidate his victory without the need for a coalition partner. Mitsotakis' New Democracy Party was 20 percentage points ahead of its main rival, the left-wing Syriza Party, with more than 80% of votes counted.
Hope defeated pessimism and unity defeated division. I am proud and I'm moved as I feel the weight of the responsibility that such an impressive percentage puts on my shoulder. I promise to work even harder to honor your trust. The result is more than clear. Citizens want a strong government with a 4-year horizon, with bolder changes, so that we can quickly make up the lost ground that still separates us from Europe.
We resume our news bulletin in the French port city of Marseille. On Sunday, firefighters announced the death of the 3 young men. They also said that the victims were 25 years old. A source in the French police said that 2 passengers in the car, which was targeted by the bullets, managed to escape while the attackers fled in their car. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said on Saturday she held positive talks with French counterpart Emmanuel Macron, despite recent tensions between the 2 nations. Leadership Meloni and Macron met on the sidelines of the Group of 7 summit in Hiroshima, seeking to turn the page after a French minister accused Rome of mishandling an influx of migrants. According to an Élysée official, said that Macron and Meloni had spoken about Ukraine, but also migration and Tunisia.
Thank you. Io oggi con Emmanuel Macron ho parlato moltissimo.
I spoke a lot with the French President Emmanuel Macron today, and we are dealing with the migrant issue about Tunisia, about how this should be dealt with a structural way, and about the fact that the next European Council must bring concrete solutions. We have had long discussions, and we have achieved great results. We must act immediately. It seems to me there is the full willingness of Macron to help with this.
Global financial institutions as unbalanced and unfair, Secretary General of the United Nations called for accelerating the pace of economic recovery and containing global economic challenges according to innovative mechanisms and developed tools.
It's time to reform both the Security Council and the Bretton Woods institutions. And this is essentially a question of redistributing power in line with the realities of today's world.
And in different news, U.S. President Joe Biden on Sunday stated that he was willing to cut spending, but would not agree to a deal with Republicans in Congress on raising the U.S. federal debt limit and cutting the budget solely on their terms.
I've done my part. We put forward a proposal to cut spending by more than $1 trillion. On top of the nearly $3 trillion in deficit reduction that I previously proposed through the combination of spending cuts and new revenues. Now it's time for the other side to move from their extreme positions, because much of what they've already proposed is simply, quite frankly, unacceptable.
And earlier, debt limit talks broke up at the U.S. Capitol. It marked another sudden turn of events in negotiations to avoid a potentially catastrophic government default that had come to an abrupt standstill. More details with Marwa Belaywer.
Debt limit talks halted again late Friday at the U.S. Capitol, shortly after resuming. Another sudden turn of events after negotiations had come to an abrupt standstill earlier in the day, when Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said it's time to pause negotiations. A White House official also acknowledged there are real differences.
Yesterday, I really felt we were at the location where I could see the path. The White House is just, look, we can't be spending more money next year. We have to spend less than we spent the year before. It's pretty easy.
Top Republican negotiators for McCarthy exited the brief meeting shortly after talks restarted Friday evening. They said there were no further negotiations planned for Friday, and they were uncertain on next steps.
This wasn't a negotiation today. This was a candid discussion about realistic numbers, a realistic path forward, and something that truly changes the trajectory of this country's spending and debt problems.
However, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said during a news conference in Hiroshima before the debt limit talks halt that they were hopeful for a resolution.
Here at the G7, countries want to have a sense of how these negotiations are going to play out, and the President has expressed confidence that he believes that we can drive to an outcome where we do avoid default. And part of the reason that he's returning home tomorrow rather than continuing with the rest of the trip is so that he can help lead the effort to bring it home. This is not generating alarm or a kind of vibration in the room. I would just say that the countries are keenly interested in what is a significant story, and the President has been able to tell them that he believes that we can get to a good result here.
The negotiators are racing to strike a budget deal to resolve the standoff. Biden's administration is reaching for a deal with Republicans led by McCarthy, as the nation careens towards a potentially catastrophic debt default if the government fails to increase the borrowing limit, now at $31 trillion to keep paying the nation's bills. Republicans are demanding steep spending cuts the Democrats oppose.
A price cap the G7 imposed on the Russian crude reached its objective, according to observers, by reducing Moscow's revenues. However, the head of the International Energy Agency, which provides analysis and input to the G7 on energy, does not see the enhanced enforcement of the price caps affecting the global oil and fuel supply. More details with Salman Asib.
The G7, including the European Union and Australia, agreed to impose a $60 per barrel price cap on Russian seaborne crude oil, and also set an upper price limit for Russian oil products to deprive Moscow of revenues for its invasion of Ukraine. However, the International Energy Agency Director, Fatih Birol, does not expect this move will actually change the supply situation for crude oil and oil products.
Strengthening the enforcement of price caps will not affect the availability of crude oil and fuel worldwide. Any significant changes in the markets, as always, we will reflect in our analysis and our reports, but for the time being, I don't see a reason to make a change in our analysis.
During the G7 communique, the group said they will have enhanced efforts to counter evasion of the caps while avoiding spillover effects and maintaining global energy supply. For Birol, he explained that the price cap might have achieved two primary objectives. First, it managed to maintain a steady flow of Russian oil without causing market tightness, while simultaneously diminishing Moscow's revenues. Nonetheless, he highlighted that as Russia is now the most sanctioned country in the world, there are still questions about their effectiveness, and this is what the group of 7 nations are trying to do: counter the evasion of price caps on Russian energy, close loopholes, and ensure the sanctions are painful for Russia.
Russia did play the energy card, and it did fail. But there are some loopholes, some challenges for the better functioning of the oil price cap. By our estimates, Moscow did not deliver its announced 500,000 barrels per day supply, cut in full. Indeed, Russia may be boosting volumes to make up for lost revenue. Its productions actually hit 8.3 million barrels per day in April, the highest since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine last year.
It's worth noting that the G7 price cap will allow non-EU countries to continue importing seaborne Russian crude oil, but it will prohibit shipping, insurance and reinsurance companies from handling cargoes of Russian crude around the globe unless it is sold for less than the price cap.
Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon premieres in this year's Cannes Film Festival. It is an enthralling account of methodical elimination of Native Americans in early 1920s Oklahoma, based on David Grant's acclaimed non-fiction book about the Osage murders. This is a sprawling, densely plotted work that demands a lot of its audience. But the 3.5-hour running time is fully justified in an escalating tragedy that never loosens its grip. A sordid illustration of historical erasure with echoes in today's bitterly divisive political gamemanship. The end of our program. For more, visit our social media platforms. Thank you for watching and goodbye for now.